Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to James Vigor for sending in some awesome pictures of his Imperial Guard forces battling it out against the Sons of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels. Well done on the victory, James. Apparently he smashed his opponent by turn 4 and he only lost a couple of Sentinels, a Tank Commander and 3 Infantry Squads. So absolutely fantastic victory and awesome pictures. Thank you for sending them in, James. And if anyone else has got any cool pictures of what we use in my videos, then please post them on my Facebook page or email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. Without further ado, let's take a look at today's video. Now today, guys, I want to talk about Baneblades and other Imperial Guard super heavies that you can find in your codex, like the Shadow Sword, the Stormlord, all those kind of ones. I want to talk about our codex super heavies. And I really want to just sit down and hammer out how viable are our super heavies after the most recent balanced data slate. Because there's been a lot of chatter online. Loads of people have been posting really good memes and really inspirational videos saying, got my Baneblade back on the table. And we've also seen lots of stories about super heavies actually doing really well again now. Like, for example, James's story today, like about how he smashed the Blood Angels. You would have asked, if you'd asked me a month ago if someone had taken a Baneblade against Blood Angels, would they have done well? I would have said no, they would have got smashed. And now we're seeing Guard Armour, Guard super heavies absolutely wrecking face. So what I want to talk about, guys, is are Baneblades competitive? Are they back on the menu? Do our super heavies have a place in our list now? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? And how can you get the absolute most out of your Guard super heavy? So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. But first, ad time. Are you a company commander struggling to keep the morale of your men up in this difficult and trying meta that we find ourselves in? Worried that the commissar's executions just aren't having the morale boosting effect that they used to have, and now he's going to ask you to avoid the red tape? Well, don't panic, because thanks to today's sponsor, Across the Realms, morale boosting reinforcements are just round the corner. The Pinup Corps are a group of badass guards women who are ready to fight and die for the Emperor, and they're going to look damn good whilst doing it. In addition to their guard issue equipment, each one of these ladies is packing twin demolisher cannons, and they know how to use them. These finely detailed models come with all manner of special and heavy weapons, as well as walkers and tanks and transports and officers and sergeants. Everything you will need to fight the enemies of the Emperor and win. So what are you waiting for? Check out the links in the description below and turn your guardsman faces from this to this. Thank you once again to Across the Realm for supporting the channel by sponsoring this video. And now back to the main event. So traditionally, Baneblades have not been viable. And the simple reason for that is they were too expensive, they were too fragile, and they didn't do enough damage. It was simple as that. Now, those have all changed since the last balanced data slate. Firstly, they were too expensive. I'm not talking too expensive in money, we're talking too expensive in points. A Baneblade with a couple of sponsons will take up over 25% of your army. So, and there are obviously other ones than Baneblades which are less expensive, but the Baneblade is kind of the middle of the road one that we're going to be using for a lot of our examples today, guys. So, the Baneblade was 410 points. You had to spend 50 points per sponsor if you wanted to put any sponsons on it, and you kind of needed to because without those sponsons, it didn't do enough damage. So, you spend your extra 100 points on your sponsons to get, some heavy bolters, some lascans, but then you're looking at 510 points. Really expensive for a unit that could quite easily be picked up off the table by a unit of devastators with las cannons. Sounds crazy, but they could basically just cripple it in one go and it's done. Wasn't that hard because you didn't even get a save and all that kind of crazy stuff. There was just so many things out there, like as simple things that aren't even competitive, that could just cripple or pick up Baneblades in a turn or two. It was just mad. But things have changed. So now those sponsons are only 30 points per sponsor, which means now your Baneblade with 2 sponsons is only 470 points. That's not bad at all. In fact, you can now put on 4 sets of sponsons onto this thing, and it's only going to cost you 20 points more than it did before, but that's a hell of a lot of firepower you're getting on that chassis. Now, me personally, I'd probably just stick to the 2 sets of sponsons, but it can, because if you put the 4 sets on, yeah, you're getting more points, you're getting more firepower, but it's costing you more points. So it is a fine balance. Now the points cost has come down, noticeably. That's like a 40-point discount. That's almost a 10% discount on your Baneblades with sponsons overall. That's kind of nice. So now, okay, so we've answered question number 1. have we answered question number 2? Do they have enough firepower? It's like, well, now that you've got things like Hammer of the Emperor that are available to all Imperial Guard units, not just infantry, all Imperial Guard units now get Hammer of the Emperor, which means every time you get a 6 to hit, it auto wounds. And this is absolutely fantastic because, well, anyone that's been running Hammer of the Emperor for the last 6 months will tell you that it's a really, really nice change. It makes all sorts of units really viable and it actually makes Guard firepower. You should fear it again. You should fear Guard firepower. So its damage output has got better as well because we've got Hammer of the Emperor, which is absolutely fantastic. And then it gets to, well, what about its durability? Because the first two you could kind of get away with if it was mega durable. And so I think this last category is where the Baneblade has improved the most by a long way. I think, in all fairness, the points cost, it's nice, it's a bit cheaper. Hammer of the Emperor, it's nice, it's got Hammer of the Emperor. But the main reason, the main thing that's making a Baneblade viable is its durability. The Baneblade went from a 3+ save and nothing else to a 2+ save, which is already really good. Those of you that have been using the Leaving Rust with 2+ saves will tell you how good 2+ save rusters are. And not only does it now have a 2+ save, the Baneblade, it also now has Armor of Contempt. Which, Armor of Contempt on a 2+ save, I always like to describe as almost like a pseudo-invulnerable save. If someone is hitting you with a melter gun, you still get a 5+ save if you've got a 2+ save with Armor of Contempt. That's like, essentially, it's really, really nice. It's almost better than an invulnerable save in many ways, because if the Baneblade had just stayed like a 3+ with a 5+ invulnerable save, that wouldn't have been, that would have been okay, but it wouldn't have been as good, because Armor of Contempt means that, and the 2+ save means that you actually end up getting a 4+ save against AP3. Now, a lot of anti-tank weapons are still AP3. And I think it's because a lot of like the gap between small arms and anti-tank has kind of shrunk. So like loads of small arms have got AP1 now and AP2 and all that kind of stuff. But anti-tank still really starts at AP3, but it ends at AP4. A lot of factions, obviously there's exceptions to this, but a lot of factions will have their long range anti-tank AP be -3 and their close range one be AP4. And so it tends to be that they either get to plink away at you with some long range AP3 shots. Well, that's fine. I'm going to have a 4+ save against all of that. Or it's like, okay, well, actually, you're going to have to get up close and personal to me. I have a chance to screen you out. And if you don't kill me, my Baneblade is certainly going to kill you back, even if you have got AP4 weapons. So it just means that, yeah, they're so durable now. It's really good. Just think about this. 33% of every melter shot that is fired at your Baneblade will be stopped. If a squad drops in with 3 melter guns, statistically, only one of those is going to get through. They should get 2 hits, and they should get maybe a wound, and then you actually have a chance, you have a 30% chance of just stopping that. Just stopping it. So that's pretty crazy when you think about it. Now, the thing is, if the Baneblade's durability is its main viability, and we're talking about how can we get Baneblades back on there, because they already sound like they're pretty on the menu, right? Okay, we've kind of established that they're looking good, but as Guard, we have access to lots of tools in the toolbox, because we've had all these things, all these supplements that have been slapped on us over the years. We have lots of tools in the toolbox. So how far can we push the Baneblade's durability? Because if that's what is kind of making it the most, if that's what's making it viable, let's make it really viable by making it even tougher. And by making it tougher, we're increasing its firepower because it's around longer, so for more turns it's firing. It might only be hitting on 4s, but if it's firing 5 turns out of 5, in comparison to it used to firing like 1 or 2 turns out of 5, then it's really, really good. Even with the new buffs, let's say your Baneblade on average dies by turn 3, if you can add more buffs onto it to make it be around turn 5, you've actually again increased its firepower by another 40%. So just bear that in mind. Don't forget you've got Relentless, so that even if they take it down to its bottom bracket, you can just spend 1 CP and put it on its top bracket every single turn. So don't forget that. So what can we do to make this thing even tougher? Well, firstly, you can take a tank case on this thing. You can take a super heavy tank case and you can give it hold down deployment. This model receives the benefit of cover until the first time it moves in the battle. This is not a 2+ save, this is on top of it. So suddenly you've got a Baneblade with a 1+ save ignoring AP, reducing all AP by 1. That's incredible. That means if someone hits you with a plasma gun or something else that's AP3, you're on a 3-up save. If someone is hitting you with a melter gun, you're on a 4-up save. Now obviously, once you move, that might not be viable. But guess what? There's 2 scenarios where that is totally viable. Firstly, you just lock down a whole area of the board by having your Baneblade just cover a whole fire lane. And anything, and like it just covers objectives, and it just sits there. It's like, if you want to try and take an objective and got a full strength Baneblade, no one wants to face the firepower of full strength Baneblade. No one at all. The other thing is that whilst you might only get that for the first turn, because let's say you're playing on a dense terrain board and you're going to have to move around, that's fine. It just makes your Baneblade less likely to get alpha striked. It's actually really unlikely to get alpha striked. So it makes it really good. So now you're on a 1-up save Baneblade. It then starts getting even crazier when you think the fact that if you take a couple of Astropaths, and bear in mind guys, we all know that Astropaths are kind of needed in guard armies with all the terrain we see on heavy 9th edition boards these days. You're taking the Astropath for its Astro Divination, but you can also take it for Psychic Secondaries, but you can also take it for its intended original purpose, which is buffing psychic powers. And the 2 that you're going to be looking at are going to be Psychic Barrier and Night Shroud. Now, Psychic Barrier things start getting crazy with Psychic Barrier, okay? It's a pretty simple power, and we've had it for a long time. A lot of people, it increases, if you get it off, you increase the save, whether it's an invulnerable save or an arm save, you increase the save of a unit by 1. And that means your Baneblade goes onto a 0-up save. So if someone hits you with a plasma gun, thanks to Arm Contempt, you're still on a 2+ save. If someone hits you with a melter gun, you're on a 3+ save. That is insanely good. And again, yeah, maybe you're not going to have hold down deployment for every turn. And maybe if you don't get turn 1, you're not going to have your psychic power off. That's fine. Look, what I'm saying is it is totally possible, depending on the board you're playing, depending on where the objectives are, depending on how you're using your Baneblade, it is totally possible to have this thing just locked down an area of the board, cover a couple of objectives, and just have it sitting there hyper durable to the point where your opponent can't deal with it. And if you need to move it, it's still running around with a 1-up save, bearing in mind you can just get Psychic Barrier off on it every single turn. Now, you can also, with Night Shroud, give your Baneblade an inbuilt -1. So when a Baneblade is fully buffed up, you are looking at a unit that has -1 to hit, 0-up save, reduce AP by 1, 26 wounds. And you can repair it a wound a turn with a stratagem, and you can make it act on top profile. It's genuinely terrifying. It's genuinely powerful. Okay? So Baneblades are absolutely good, but there is one Achilles heel to the whole thing. And I really hope you guys are all super hyped and excited, but we have to be presenting a balanced point of view here, a balanced thing, because there is one Achilles heel that makes the Baneblade struggle in competitive boards. And I'm not gonna, what is it, Mordian? Just tell us. It's big. It's really, really big. And the problem you will find is if you're going onto like a WTC style board, or you're playing on a board with a lot of terrain, you are genuinely going to struggle you might even struggle to deploy the thing on the board. Let's say you can get it on the board. Most deployment zones will allow you to fit one on. Okay. You genuinely might not be able to move that around the board very much at all. There's always a rule at WTC that you should be able to fit a knight between all the buildings. Okay, that's fine. But a Baneblade has a bigger footprint than a knight. And as far as I'm aware, no one's really updated that kind of, I don't know if it's official or unofficial, but that sort of expectation that you should always fit a knight between the building. Well, Baneblades are bigger than knights. They're fatter. They've got they've got a bigger footprint. And so the real problem with Baneblades is not that it's now no longer their firepower, it's now no longer their durability, it's now no longer their points cost. It simply comes down to the 9th edition board setup, to the 9th edition styles that we're seeing at the moment. Now, there should be, realistically, you should still be able to try and drive this thing around a bit, but it could be tricky, guys. It's 100. I don't want people just dismissing that. Okay, if you're playing in a local event or you're playing with just your mates in your battle bunker, that's absolutely fine. You shouldn't have to worry about this. But if you're going to like a fairly competitive event, especially in the UK, you're going to be playing on a lot of terrain and with just very, very dense boards. And you may find that this Baneblade literally can't draw line of sight to anything. You may find that this Baneblade cannot. It struggles massively. Now, if that's the case, I don't want you to lose hope, because whilst I've said there's a massive Achilles heel, there is potentially a silver lining, potentially a glimmer of hope. Okay, because the Baneblade is actually good in close combat, so you don't need to worry so much about it getting tied up. What do you mean, Mordian Glory? The Baneblade is going to combat. Everyone knows vehicles aren't good in combat. Well, firstly, the Baneblade has its close combat weapon is adamantium tracks. AP2, which is good for armor contempt. AP, not its armor contempt, it running into some armor contempt. So AP2 is good, and it does D3 damage, an average of 2 damage, which is, again, okay, because it means you've got a chance of, if someone's reduced damage by 1, you might be able to do 2 damage to it. So it's actually good. Also, it comes with like 9 attacks or something absolutely insane. So it's actually quite good. Now, it hits on 5s normally in combat, but you can spend 1 CP a turn on this thing, and you can use Crush Them. Now, Crush Them says in the charge phase. Now, unless I have missed an FAQ somewhere, it doesn't need to be your charge phase. You just have to remember to use it before you get to the fight phase. You can spend Crush Them every single turn, yours and your opponent's, to make your Baneblade hit on 2s in combat. Doesn't matter how degraded it is, it hits on 2s in combat. Okay? Don't forget, your Baneblade can also essentially shoot into combat without caring. It's a Titanic vehicle. It can shoot its weapons into combat without caring. It can shoot the blast weapons, even if it's surrounded in engagement range. It can shoot the blast weapons out of engagement range as if it wasn't in engagement range. And it can fall back and shoot and charge, no problem. So when we're talking about like Baneblades and durability and how good they are and all this kind of good stuff, whilst there will be a temptation, especially with many of us who have been used to our Baneblades being so fragile, to have this thing sitting back and not doing what it wants to do, and being careful with it and husbanding it, there is another way of looking at the Baneblade. Yes, it's this fantastic gun platform. Yes, it's incredibly durable. But the way of looking at it, and this is kind of crazy, and some people might call this sacrilegious, maybe even heresy, but it could be a massive, massive fucking distraction kind of effects. I mean, bear this in mind, guys. You've got a Baneblade that's barreling down on you. It's spitting fire. It's unleashing 11 bowels of hell. It's smashing into you. You can't ignore it, because if you ignore it, it's just going to drive around smashing you. It's going to find its way around the board one way or another. There's always going to be somewhere it can move to, and it's just going to sit there. It's got so much firepower that you can't ignore it. We did a video yesterday about how to kill unkillable things, and one of the ones is you can just kite it or whatever. You can't really kite the Baneblade. It's going to shoot you. It's got firepower. You can't just ignore it and kill everything around it, because it's got a lot of firepower. You can't tie it up with chaff or anything like that like you can with Terminators, because again, it's going to shoot. It's going to fall back. It can do what it wants. So one way I would seriously consider using a Baneblade is just to ram it down people's throat. Just take your super heavy of choice and just ram it down people's throats. And if it dies even with all the buffs on it, if it dies turn 3, you don't care. If the rest of your army has essentially been left almost unmolested, and your Baneblade has just been an absolute mega monster, just really messing up your opponent's plans for like 2 or 3 turns, that's absolutely fantastic. And so one interesting thing, one faction that really gets a lot out of the Baneblade, we're not just talking out of super heavies in general, one faction in the Guard that really actually should start looking at super heavies is Scions. Sounds crazy, right? But Scions and Guard could be taken, you can take 2 detachments and they both get to keep their regiment. As far as I'm aware, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this was, all confirmed and wrapped up in the last round of FAQs and everything, where basically, even though Scions have got a different regiment trait to Guard, you can take a detachment of Scions and you can take a detachment of Guard, and they get to keep their regiment traits. And likewise, Scions now get access to the Hammer of the Emperor, and you can take a Scion detachment and a Guard detachment, and they still both get access to the Hammer of the Emperor. Okay, so there's nothing stopping you. And now don't forget, you're like, the CP cost for taking a super heavy auxiliary detachment is 0. Now, why are Scions starting to look at Baneblades? Okay, well, the reason why Scions have to look at Baneblades is because you've got your sort of 5 Torx Primes and you've got your battalion of Scions, but you've got to understand, if you're taking pure Scions, you're going to start running out of points to spend. It sounds crazy, I know, but you're going to be having lots of, you can take like 6 squads of Scions, and then you can take like your 3 command squads, and then your 3 officers, and then your Torx Primes. And then at that point, you're kind of just like, okay, I've still got a few points to spend here. What do I do? And it's like, well, you could start dicking around trying to like add Crusaders in, or Valkyries, or something in. But realistically, there's nothing wrong with you taking a super heavy with your Scions now. Now, again, this last bit's a bit wacky. I have to admit, I'm kind of doing this off the cuff, this bit of the video, so if I'm wrong, let me know. Please let me know. But my understanding is, and anyone who's watching this who thinks I'm not sure this is right, check the comments down below. It'll, the community here is fantastic. They'll have caught me if I said something wrong. But just bear this in mind. Imagine you've got a Scion battalion. You've got your 6 squads of Scions. You've got your 5 squads of Scions. Your 5 Torx Primes. You've got some command squads. You've got all this, and then you've just got an Arcturan pattern Stormblade. We just talked about Stormblades, didn't we? Another video. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it in this one. The Arcturan pattern Stormblade is only 400 points, so you can spend 1,600 points on Scions and then just plug in this super heavy. And you can still take Astropaths with your Scions and still buff up your Baneblade. So it's not like you're not missing out on anything. And you can still spend a CP on a tank case and give it to your Baneblade, because Scions don't really care about tank. The reason why it kind of works is Scions need a bit more durability. The Baneblade, as we've just discussed, brings a shitload of durability. Scions need that kind of big distraction hammer units that their other units can keep fighting and not just drop in and die every turn. There's a big distraction kind of effect, so Scions are actually sticking around longer, which is great. And they also, they don't care about like full payload Basilisks or Manticores. Because if you're running pure Scions, you're not running any artillery. So the Baneblade helps you there. So it's just a really, really cool idea. I genuinely don't know if it'll work or not, but it's a really sort of cool idea to have this like these Tauroxes with Scions in being backed up by just a really big fuck off Baneblade. It just, or super heavy or Stormblade, it doesn't really matter. It's just an idea, guys. But let me know down in the comments if that's viable or not, or if I've got sort of the wrong end of the stick. But that's kind of what's going through my head at the moment. So that's it for today's video, guys. Are Baneblades back on the menu? You're goddamn right they are. They're not perfect. They're big old brutes that you might struggle to draw a line of sight with. But depending on the table, you might just find that bringing in the super heavy makes the difference between winning and losing your games of 40k now, which is good. I cannot tell you how happy I am that Baneblades are back on the menu. They are such a cool unit. And seriously, guys, I've got a tournament in a couple of weeks, and I was going to run my traditional mech list. I'm thinking of adding in a super heavy, which will be fantastic. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have, please consider giving it a like and a subscribe and a comment and all that good stuff. To be totally honest with you guys, any additional interaction you can give this video gives it a big old boost with the YouTube algorithm. So I'll be really grateful for anyone that could just, like I said, like, subscribe, comment, any of that good stuff. Thank you very much. Now, if you've really enjoyed today's video and you want to go the extra mile for supporting the Mordian Glory channel, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. It's entirely thank you to the channel members and Patreon supporters that the Mordian Glory channel is still going. And it's actually my full-time gig now, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. But I want to give a shout-out to our latest channel members and Patreon supporters. So, massive thank you to Tent, Ian Hawkins, Paul Savage, Panzer Kampfwagen Baneblade, Trichroma and Castellan for becoming channel members. Thank you guys for doing your part. Thank you for joining the Mordian 50th Rifles. I also want to say thank you to our latest patrons as well. So thank you to Naril, Gankistani, Alex Dengal, Ben Thorne, Alon Harfin, Marcus Roberts and Tim de Jägermeister for becoming Patreon supporters. Absolutely incredible. And I also want to say a little thank you to Lars Nielsen for upping their Patreon support from $4 to $7. That's really appreciated, man. Thank you so much. Last but certainly not least, I want to give a personal, heartfelt thank you out to our top tier Patreon supporters and channel members. These people have really gone above and beyond the call of duty when it comes to supporting the Mordian Glory channel. So massive thank you to August Varney, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nicholas Walsh and Swordfish Trombone for being subscribed at the Lord General level. Absolutely incredible, guys. And a special thank you to Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton and Ross Miller for being subscribed at the Commissar level. All of you are absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your generous support, guys. You know how much it's changed my life, so thank you so much. But that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.